What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining. This is my first legitimate YouTube video I'm making. I wanted to discuss today my views on consciousness and the lack of free will that I think we have. And this all started for me when I was in my teen years and I took some psychedelics. And I had this experience of total oneness with the universe. I was just laying in my bed in my room, and it was a sort of dissolution of the feeling that I'm somehow separate from everything around me. And I noticed that, or it seemed to me at the time, that the universe was like, if you can imagine a giant machine with gears that all push each other, and every aspect of the universe is one of those gears. So me being just a gear in the universe, I'm being pushed by other gears, and I'm pushing other ones, the way I affect people, the way I affect the environment around me, and the way that people in the environment affects me. And so the universe is moving as a whole, as this machine, and I'm just a cog in that machine. And so that was my first realization, but that's all very, if you're on drugs, you're on drugs, so you can always argue it's just the drugs. The next step in me realizing this was meditation and mindfulness. And at first I'd heard about mindfulness from people like Alan Watts, and a lot of what he said really resonated with me and my past psychedelic experiences. But then I came across, I've known Sam Harris for a long time, but I came across Sam Harris's Waking Up app and his meditation work. And in that app, he takes you through a course of daily meditations that you have to go through in order to unlock the regular meditations. And it's essentially every day he breaks down another layer of this idea of free will and the self as an actor in the universe. And what I mean by that, and what he means by that, is that we all have this idea that we are creators of what's happening to us. So we create our thoughts in our mind, we create the ideas that we act out, and we create the actions that we take. And if you really take the time to sit with your mind in observance, and so a lot of people think meditation is either sitting with your thoughts and just letting them process, and then other people, including myself before, think it's like a focus practice where you focus on your breath and try to get your thoughts to stop thinking. But really what meditation is it's an observation practice. It's the practice of not focusing on anything specific and just observing the way that your conscious experience works and how your mind works without any current action that you're taking. And so if you do that, if you sit down, the first thing that you notice, that you already intrinsically know, is that the sensations of your body, whether it's cold or hot, or the way that you feel in your chair, depends on the chair, depends on the temperature around you. And the sounds you hear are made by external objects. And so those things are not within your control. And so the first step is recognizing that much of my conscious experience is happening to me. Let's say a bird chirps and you remember Three Little Birds by Bob Marley. You can't really say that that was your intention to think of that song. The birds chirped, that influenced you through your senses, and then you had that thought. Which leads me into the next point. If we accept that external things are obviously not done by us, which is pretty obvious, the next step above that is to think about your thoughts themselves and your internal experience. And if you take the time to really, and you have to be honest with yourself here, because if you're if you're successful at something, or if you've done good things for people and you think of yourself as a good person or a successful person, it's comfortable and it's nice to think that you're the person, you have the power to do these things, and these things happen because of your choices. And so the good things you've done happen because you had good thoughts and you acted on them and created good in the world, or your success is from your resilience and your ability to work. But if you really pay attention about where these thoughts come from, they just appear. So if I have the thought of a gray elephant or something, I didn't think of a gray elephant before the thought of the gray elephant came into my mind. So you don't have a pre-thought before a thought. You just have the thought. It just comes, and you do this thing where you associate with it, and you're like, oh, that's me. I just created that. But how did you create it if you didn't intend to create it? If the thought just came into your mind and now you're thinking it, it seems to me that you're more of an observer of the thought than you are the person creating the thoughts, or the whatever creating the thoughts. And so this is, I've had a lot of conversations with people about this topic, and it's pretty difficult to grasp for people who are very attached to their free will and to their actions in the world. But if you apply a serious level of scrutiny to what's happening in your mind, thoughts arise and then they go. You don't know where they came from or where they went. They just pass through your mind. I had a JKD teacher, karate teacher, whatever. He would explain it as like, your mind is the clear blue sky, and thoughts are like the clouds that come in and then they come out. But just because you see the cloud, or the cloud is part of your experience, doesn't mean that you are the cloud, because it comes from somewhere unbeknownst to you, and it goes somewhere that you also don't understand. And so when you start to, it's a hard thing to accept, but once you accept that, or you can even play with that thought, you can pretend to accept it and then observe and just watch the way that when you sit still and you allow your mind to run, the way that you just keep getting impulses and things that your brain just comes up with. For example, me, if I sit down to meditate, the amount of ideas I get to do things just from sitting in place is unbelievable. And I can't, I don't have the choice to not have those thoughts. I don't have the choice to just, I don't want to think about that right now, because the thoughts come anyway. I could say I don't want those thoughts, and then if I'm really good at controlling my mind, maybe some other thoughts will come in. But I don't determine what those thoughts are either. And I don't determine whether I'm the type of person who can control those thoughts. So the whole experience is an observational one. And when you recognize that, you can, you sort of understand the gear thing that I was talking about earlier, that you're kind of watching this whole play unfold, both externally and internally. So the external is obvious. Okay, this is just happening, I can watch it. But then the internal is a bit less obvious. But if you really pay attention, it becomes kind of obvious. It's also just a sort of show you're watching. And even you could say, okay, well, fine, the thoughts are just coming in on their own, but I decide whether to act on a thought. So if I have a bad thought, I can not act on it. And if I have a good thought, I can choose to act on that thought. And that's not accurate either, because you don't choose which thought you find valid. So your approach to your thoughts, or your way of thinking what is a good action and what is a bad action, comes from two things. Those two things are your genetics and your environment. And so your genetics is what you were born with, what you got from your parents, their ways of being, whatever. And then your environment is what you learned along the way. So if a person learned from a young age that alcoholism can be very dangerous and very harmful, they may get the impulse to drink alcohol and say, no, I'm not going to drink alcohol because I know it's dangerous. So they have this feeling of control where they're choosing not to act on a thought because they think it's dangerous. But why do they think that way? Why did their mind versus another person's mind decide that That's not an action they want to take. So I like to imagine like fraternal twins, or whatever they're called, identical twins, Bob A and Bob B. And 30 years down the line, Bob A is afraid of aggression, right? He has more of a fear of aggression than Bob A does. And so we would ask, why is that the case? Like, it doesn't, is there free will? Did they just choose to be different? I'd argue no. The reason that Bob A acts differently from Bob B can be down to the smallest difference in their environment. It could be just them, as they're growing up, one day their dad yells a little harder at one of them than the other. And so although Bob B fears aggression, so he doesn't yell at his kids, and he thinks it's his natural proclivity or his choice, it really can be traced back to that one difference in environment that they have that caused him to think a different way about the universe. And so that can explain any difference in human beings. There's no reason to add free will into the mix. If we look at this gear structure of the universe, every action, every thought comes from millions of events before it that caused the person to move in that direction. So, the argument against free will, then, is there's only genetics and environment that cause you to act in any way, to think any thought, to behave in any way. If you wanted to include free will into this equation, you need to find a third factor. A third factor that somehow you could imagine sticking a stick into the gears and messing with it. And so what is that third factor that can mess with the gears of the universe, the way that they're already turning? And for some, it's God or some kind of supernatural intervention, which you need evidence for, which I'd argue there isn't any reliable evidence for. And even if you could prove that there was a God, you would then have to prove that this God is not a part of the universe's function. So going back to the trip story I was saying, the way that the universe moves as a unit, you would have to find some kind of factor that isn't part of the universe's motion, or you can call it the universal will. And to my knowledge, there's no such factor. I've thought about this a lot, and I've listened to a lot of people talk about it. And so that factor has to come from a spiritual belief, and even that spiritual belief gets kind of muddied because you don't know if that would actually be able to do what you want it to do, which is give you free will. And so I guess to close the point of this video, two things. First, that most people are living in a conscious experience that isn't representative of reality. So they have this idea that they're moving through life, choosing to do things and having thoughts that are their own, as in they're creating the thought, or they want to have the thoughts. That doesn't make any sense because your thoughts are as much part of the gears turning as anything else is. The birds chirping outside, your noisy neighbors, whatever you want to call it, whether it's a sunny day or a rainy day and how that's making you feel. All of that is part of the gears. And so you first have to separate yourself from that idea that there's some sort of self that is doing things. And then the natural extension of that is that there can be no free will. There can be nothing that acts outside of the universal will. So you might say, well, I have my will, but your will is just a gear in the universal will. So you could say this gear is moving at 1 mile per hour, right? Oh, that's me. I chose to move 1 mile per hour. But the gears that are attached to it are moving at a certain speed that causes it to move at 1 mile per hour. So you might say, that's me, but if you is just based on whichever gears are behind you, what is you? And where is the ability to do anything of your own volition? So yeah, that's my thoughts on free will and consciousness and the lack of free will. And I hope you consider it. I hope you think about it. And I think that it can be both scary and freeing. It's scary in that you don't want to lose control. You don't want to just like accept fate, that whatever happens in your life happens in your life, even though it's probably the case. But it's also freeing in that you don't have to beat yourself up when things go wrong or when you made a wrong decision. You have to understand that everything has led up to this moment. And whatever's happening in this moment is happening to you. It's not happening by you. And it's not an excuse to not improve, because a person who improves is a person who improves, even if that's not their free will or their own motion. So think about it. Try meditation. Try to observe your thoughts. Try to see, is there really anything there that's me, that I'm moving? And let me know what you think. Am I missing something? Am I a young delusional man? Or am I onto something? And is this something that like the majority of people are asleep to? That is the reality of being a human being. And I think it's so important to find the truth, to know what is this experience that we're living. And I think the closer you are to the truth, the more real of a life you live. Whether that truth is fun or good or not good, we want to live in truth. So let me know what you think. Am I delusional? Do you have an argument against me? Do you have a third factor? That's it. Thanks for watching. That's what it is.